Randy Kraft appeared to be an ordinary citizen, college-educated, intelligent, and employed. He graduated with an economics degree, served in the Air Force, and worked as both a teacher and truck driver. Those who knew him saw a man navigating life's challenges, including his military discharge due to discriminatory policies of the era. But behind this facade lived one of California's most methodical serial killers. Kraft's high IQ of 129 and organized personality allowed him to maintain his double life for over a decade. His ability to appear helpful and trustworthy made him particularly dangerous, as victims willingly accepted rides or assistance from someone who seemed genuinely caring. This contrast between public persona and private actions demonstrates how predators can hide in plain sight within our communities. If you're fascinated by criminal psychology and how killers hide among us, like, subscribe, and share for more true crime analysis. But every double life eventually faces exposure, and Kraft's came through an unexpected encounter with law enforcement. May 14, 1983, at 1:10 a.m., Officer Sterling and Sergeant Howard spotted a brown Toyota Celica driving erratically on the San Diego Freeway in Orange County, California. The vehicle weaved between lanes, prompting what initially appeared to be a routine drunk driving stop. When officers approached the Toyota, they encountered Randy Kraft, who casually tossed a beer bottle onto the pavement. His pants remained undone, and he failed multiple sobriety tests. The 38-year-old man seemed cooperative, but intoxicated, presenting no immediate threat to the officers conducting their standard procedures. Sergeant Howard approached the passenger side to complete the vehicle inspection. What he discovered would change the trajectory of one of California's most extensive serial murder investigations. 25-year-old Marine Terry Lee Gambrell sat lifeless in the passenger seat, a ligature mark clearly visible around his neck. His hands were bound with shoelaces, and his jeans were opened, exposing his genitalia. The officers immediately secured the scene and began documenting evidence within the vehicle. They discovered prescription bottles containing lorazepam, multiple empty beer bottles, and blood on the passenger seat that did not belong to Gambrell. Most significantly, they found an envelope containing over 47 photographs showing young men in explicit, compromising positions, appearing lifeless. Sergeant Howard immediately suspected they had captured the California Strangler, the killer who had terrorized Southern California for over a decade. The methodical nature of the evidence, combined with the victim's condition, matched patterns law enforcement had been tracking across multiple counties. The investigation revealed that Gambrell was notably absent from Kraft's secret-coded list of 61 victims. This absence would later prove significant, as investigators determined that Gambrell's murder had directly led to Kraft's capture, making him the final victim in an unprecedented killing spree. The traffic stop represented the culmination of years of investigations across Orange, Los Angeles, Riverside, and San Bernardino counties. Multiple law enforcement agencies had been tracking similar murders characterized by restraints, strangulation, and the positioning of victims along major highways throughout Southern California. Kraft's capture provided answers to families who had lost loved ones over more than 10 years. The evidence collected from his vehicle would ultimately link him to murders spanning from 1971 to 1983, representing one of the longest documented serial killing sprees in California history. The discovery of Kraft's coded victim list raises the haunting question: how many young men had fallen prey to this methodical killer before Terry Gambrell became his final fatal mistake? Randy Kraft was born on March 19, 1945, in Long Beach, California, as the fourth child and only son of Opal Lee and Harold Herbert Kraft. The family lived in modest circumstances, with Harold working to support his wife and 4 children in post-war California. Harold Kraft had moved from Wyoming after America's entry into World War II to work as a production operative at Douglas Aircraft Company. The war effort had created numerous employment opportunities in California's expanding aerospace industry, attracting workers from across the nation seeking stable employment and better living conditions. Eventually, Harold brought his wife and 3 daughters to California, where they established their family home. In 1948, the Kraft family moved to Westminster in Orange County, where they would remain throughout Randy's formative years. The community provided a stable environment for raising children during the post-war economic boom. Randy attended Midway City Elementary School, where his mother, Opal Lee, actively participated in the Parent-Teacher Association. Her involvement demonstrated the family's commitment to education and community engagement, values that would initially serve Randy well in his academic pursuits. Teachers and classmates quickly recognized Randy's exceptional intelligence and academic abilities. His performance consistently exceeded grade-level expectations, leading to his advancement to accelerated classes at 17th Street Junior High School by 1957. This early academic success established a pattern of high achievement that would continue through his educational career. Randy graduated from high school in 1963 and enrolled at Claremont Men's College, where he initially appeared to be a model student and citizen. His academic performance remained strong, and he actively participated in various campus activities and organizations that reflected his developing political interests. During his college years, Randy became involved in the Reserve Officers Training Corps, demonstrating an interest in military service. He also engaged in active political participation, notably supporting Barry Goldwater's 1964 presidential campaign and publicly expressing support for America's involvement in the Vietnam War. However, Randy's college experience also marked the beginning of concerning behavioral changes. He began working at a local establishment that catered to the gay community, and developed an increasing dependence on Valium to manage stomach problems and headaches that began affecting his daily life. His academic performance began to decline as he engaged in excessive drinking and participated in all-night poker games with fellow students. These activities led to his failure in an econometrics class, which delayed his graduation by 8 months beyond his expected completion date. Despite these setbacks, Randy graduated in 1968 with a degree in economics. His political views had shifted during his college years, moving from conservative Republican positions to more liberal Democratic viewpoints. He even worked for Robert Kennedy's presidential campaign, demonstrating his continued political engagement. As Randy entered adulthood with promise and intelligence, his joining the U.S. Air Force would lead to a revelation that would change everything about his future. Randy Kraft enlisted in the U.S. Air Force, where his exceptional intelligence became immediately apparent through standardized testing. He scored remarkably high on military aptitude tests, recording an IQ of 129, which placed him well above average and demonstrated his significant intellectual capabilities. His high test scores and security clearance qualifications led to his assignment at Edwards Air Force Base in Kern County, California. This high-security facility housed sensitive military operations and required personnel with both intelligence and reliability, making Kraft's placement there a reflection of his perceived trustworthiness. The turning point in Kraft's life came in 1969, when he made the decision to reveal his homosexuality to family and friends. His family and social circle accepted this revelation with understanding and support, demonstrating progressive attitudes for the era when homosexuality faced widespread social stigma. However, the military's discriminatory policies regarding homosexual service members created an insurmountable obstacle for Kraft's continued service. The U.S. Armed Forces maintained strict regulations prohibiting openly gay personnel from serving, regardless of their performance, intelligence, or dedication to duty. Kraft faced discharge from the Air Force due to these discriminatory policies, ending what had appeared to be a promising military career. This forced separation from the service represented a significant professional and personal setback that would influence his subsequent life choices and career direction. Following his military discharge, Kraft returned to civilian life and found employment as a bartender, later transitioning to work as a truck driver in Huntington Beach. These jobs provided him with income and flexibility, though they represented a departure from the career trajectory his education and intelligence might have otherwise supported. Kraft also secured a teaching position at California State University Long Beach, where his educational background and intellectual abilities proved valuable. During this period, he met Jeff Graves, a younger man from Minnesota who became his romantic partner, providing stability and companionship in his personal life. This seemingly positive development in Kraft's personal relationships contrasted sharply with the dark reality that was beginning to emerge. In March 1970, Kraft encountered 13-year-old runaway Joseph Alvin Feiner in Huntington Beach, beginning his documented pattern of predatory behavior. Kraft approached Joseph under the guise of offering assistance, inviting the vulnerable teenager to live with him in his apartment. This apparent act of kindness masked dangerous intentions, as Kraft proceeded to drug and attack the boy while he was staying in the apartment. Joseph managed to escape while Kraft was at work, fleeing the apartment and seeking help from passers-by who recognized his distressed condition. Good Samaritans assisted Joseph and ensured he received necessary medical attention at a local hospital, where healthcare providers documented evidence of the assault. Police visited Kraft's apartment to investigate the allegations, but chose not to obtain a search warrant or press charges. Their decisions stemmed from concerns about potential consequences to their careers, representing a critical failure of the justice system that would have far-reaching implications. By the end of 1971, the first murder victim, Wayne Joseph Duquette, was discovered. The 30-year-old bartender's decomposed body was found on Ortega Highway, with autopsy results indicating death by alcohol poisoning on September 20th of that year. The investigation stalled with no leads on Wayne's belongings or the identity of his killer. With law enforcement's failure to stop him after his first assault, Randy Kraft was now free to escalate his violence, and the discovery of Wayne Duquette's body marked the beginning of a killing spree that would terrorize California. December 26, 1972, marked a significant escalation in Kraft's violence when the body of 20-year-old sailor Edward Daniel Moore was discovered on Highway 405 in Seal Beach. This murder established the signature elements that would define Kraft's crimes and eventually earn him media attention as the California Strangler. Moore's body displayed binding marks at his wrists and ankles, indicating he had been restrained before death. Investigators documented blunt force trauma to his face and discovered bite marks on his body. Most disturbing was the insertion of a sock into the victim's rectum, a signature element that would become a hallmark of Kraft's methodology. On February 6th, investigators discovered an unidentified victim estimated to be between 17 and 25 years old near Terminal Island Freeway. The body showed similar characteristics to the Moore case, including the distinctive insertion of a sock, leading police to suspect the same perpetrator was responsible for both murders. The pattern continued with increasing brutality on April 9th, when 17-year-old Kevin Clark Bailey was murdered in Huntington Beach. Bailey had been castrated and sodomized before death, representing an escalation in the level of violence and sexual assault associated with the killings. 13 days later, another dismembered victim designated as John Doe was discovered. July 30th brought the murder of 20-year-old Ronnie Jean Wiebe, who was found strangled with clear evidence of restraint. Forensic examination revealed that Wiebe had been suspended or hung before death, adding another element to the killer's expanding repertoire of torture methods. The year concluded with perhaps the most gruesome discovery yet. On December 29th, 23-year-old openly bisexual art student Vincent Cruz Mestas was found in the San Bernardino Mountains. His hands had been severed and were never recovered, despite extensive searches of the surrounding area. The signature sock insertion was again present, definitively linking this murder to the previous cases. By November 1974, investigators had discovered 5 more victims along major Southern California roadways, with 3 conclusively linked to the same killer through forensic evidence and signature elements. These victims included 20-year-old Malcolm Eugene Little and 19-year-old James Dale Reeves, both discovered beside freeways with foreign objects inserted into their bodies. 18-year-old Marine Roger Edward Dickerson was found with the characteristic bite marks that had become associated with the California Strangler cases. The consistency of these signature elements across multiple crime scenes provided investigators with strong evidence that a single perpetrator was responsible for the mounting body count. January 3, 1975, brought the murder of 17-year-old high school student John Laris, discovered at Sunset Beach. Physical evidence at the scene included drag marks suggesting that 2 people had carried his body, raising questions about whether the killer was working alone or with an accomplice. 2 weeks later, on January 17th, 21-year-old Craig Jonas was discovered, strangled with what forensic experts determined appeared to be a shoelace. This method would become another signature element, as several subsequent victims would be found with their own shoelaces used as murder weapons. The geographical distribution of the murders spanned 4 counties, indicating that the killer was mobile and comfortable operating across a wide area. The frequency of discoveries suggested an active and prolific offender who was successfully evading law enforcement detection. With 14 victims now linked to the same methodical killer across 4 counties, law enforcement realized they were dealing with an unprecedented serial murderer, but their first real break in the case would come from an unexpected source. March 29, 1975, marked a pivotal moment when Keith Crotwell and Kent May left their homes to hitchhike south, unaware of the danger they would encounter. The 2 young men had planned what they believed would be a routine journey, seeking transportation from strangers along Southern California highways. Randy Kraft encountered both men in a Long Beach parking lot, where he approached them with an offer of transportation. Using his practiced method of appearing helpful and trustworthy, Kraft lured both Crotwell and May into his Ford Mustang, beginning what would become a nightmare scenario for the unsuspecting hitchhikers. As they drove, Kraft provided his passengers with beer and Valium, substances he had used in previous encounters to incapacitate potential victims. He drove aimlessly around Belmont Shore and Seal Beach, giving the drugs time to take effect, while keeping his victims disoriented about their location and circumstances. Two young witnesses observed a critical moment in this encounter. They saw Kraft push the nearly unconscious May from his distinctive black and white Mustang, while Crotwell remained slumped over the driver's shoulder. The witnesses watched as the vehicle sped away, leaving May behind but taking Crotwell to an unknown fate. A month later, investigators discovered Keith Crotwell's severed head at a pier near Long Beach Harbor. Despite extensive searches of the surrounding area, the rest of his body was never located, presenting challenges for the investigation and prosecution of his murder. The discovery led police directly to Randy Kraft, who was questioned on May 19th about his involvement with the missing men. During interrogation, Kraft admitted to picking up Crotwell, but claimed he had left him at a local cafe, providing what seemed like a plausible explanation for their encounter. Kraft explained that his car had later crashed, requiring assistance from a tow truck service. This explanation addressed potential forensic evidence that might have been found in his vehicle, while simultaneously providing an alibi for the time period when Crotwell disappeared. Jeff Graves, Kraft's romantic partner, corroborated Kraft's alibi during police questioning. His support for Kraft's version of events, combined with prosecutors' assessment that they lacked sufficient evidence and could not locate the rest of Crotwell's body, resulted in no charges being filed against Kraft. This failure to prosecute allowed Kraft to continue his activities without legal consequences. He subsequently entered into a relationship with Jeff Seelig, a 19-year-old baker's apprentice, and they moved together to Laguna Hills, where they established a shared household. The couple's relationship included a mutual interest in threesomes and picking up hitchhikers, activities that seemed to satisfy Kraft's needs during this period. For nearly a year, this arrangement appeared to provide him with sufficient outlet for his desires without resorting to violence. However, this peaceful period ended on December 10th, with the murder of 19-year-old Paul Joseph Fuchs, whose body was never discovered, but whose name appeared on Kraft's victim list. On December 31st, 22-year-old Mark Hall was tortured and murdered, his body showing evidence of being tied to a tree, castrated, burned with a lighter, and having his eyes gouged out before being suffocated with leaves and dirt. The extreme brutality of Mark Hall's murder, with evidence that he remained alive throughout much of the torture, would lead law enforcement to develop their first psychological profile of the killer. January 24, 1976, marked a turning point when law enforcement agencies from multiple counties met in Orange County to coordinate their investigation of the California Strangler cases. This multi-jurisdictional cooperation represented the first comprehensive effort to track and profile the serial killer terrorizing Southern California. During these meetings, investigators developed their first psychological profile of the perpetrator. The killer was assessed as highly intelligent, methodical, and organized, with possibly military background. Evidence supporting this assessment included his use of surgical tape on victims' noses to prevent decomposition, demonstrating knowledge of forensic countermeasures. Despite this investigative progress, Kraft continued his killing spree throughout the late 1970s and early 1980s. On April 16, 1978, 23-year-old Scott Michael Hughes became another victim. Hughes was drugged with Valium, strangled, and had one testicle surgically removed. His body was discovered fully clothed, except for missing shoelaces. The pattern continued with 23-year-old Roland Gerald Young, whose mutilated body was found near a San Diego highway. Marine Richard Allen Keith was discovered with clear evidence of restraint and strangulation, adding another military victim to Kraft's growing list of casualties. Keith Arthur King was strangled with his own shoelaces after being forced to ingest large amounts of paracetamol and alcohol. His body bore burn marks on his chest, indicating torture before death. Richard Anthony Crosby was found under similar circumstances along Highway 71 in San Bernardino, showing the geographic spread of the murders. November 12, 1978, brought the particularly brutal murder of trucker Michael Joseph Inderbeaton. The victim was castrated, violated with foreign objects, and suffered burns similar to those inflicted on Mark Hall 2 years earlier. The consistency of torture methods demonstrated Kraft's established pattern of escalating violence. Kraft's work as a truck driver took him to Oregon in 1980, expanding his killing territory beyond California. There, he murdered college graduate Michael Sean O'Fallon and an unidentified man aged 35 to 45. Both victims were killed through drug overdoses combined with strangulation, maintaining his established methodology. Returning to California, Kraft continued his activities with the murder of Robert Loggins. This case was particularly disturbing because Kraft documented the crime with photographs showing the victim in various poses with closed eyes, leaving investigators uncertain whether Loggins was alive or dead when photographed. The final known victims included Michael Cluck in Oregon, who died from 31 blows to the head, and Christopher Allen Williams, found with a paper towel stuffed in his nostrils. On February 12, 1983, Kraft committed a double murder, killing 18-year-old Jeffrey Nelson and 20-year-old Roger Duval from Buena Park. These final murders demonstrated Kraft's continued escalation and willingness to kill multiple victims simultaneously. The frequency and brutality of the attacks indicated that his psychological deterioration was accelerating, making his eventual capture increasingly crucial for public safety. As Randy Kraft continued his unprecedented killing spree with seeming impunity, he remained unaware that his next victim would become his last, and his decade of terror was about to end with a routine traffic stop. Following Kraft's arrest, investigators conducted a comprehensive search of his residence that revealed clothing and personal belongings of numerous victims whose bodies had been discovered over the years. Additional photographs of unconscious or dead men were found, providing crucial evidence linking Kraft to multiple unsolved murders across Southern California. The most significant discovery was Kraft's coded list, containing 61 victims, plus 4 double murders, totaling 65 individuals. With Terry Gambrell making 67 total victims, the scope of Kraft's crimes exceeded anything previously documented in California's criminal history. The investigation process was intensive and thorough, involving interviews with over 700 witnesses and the presentation of more than 250 pieces of evidence. This comprehensive approach ensured that prosecutors had sufficient evidence to proceed with charges, despite the complexity of linking murders that occurred over more than a decade. Kraft was ultimately charged with 15 murders committed between December 1972 and May 1983, representing the cases where evidence was strongest and most conclusive. His trial began on September 26, 1988, nearly 5 years after his arrest, reflecting the extensive preparation required for such a complex prosecution. Despite overwhelming evidence against him, Kraft entered a plea of not guilty to all charges. The trial proceeded with detailed presentation of forensic evidence, witness testimony, and documentation of the patterns linking multiple crime scenes across 4 counties. On November 29, 1989, Kraft was convicted and sentenced to death for his crimes. However, California's subsequent moratorium on capital punishment resulted in his sentence being commuted to life without the possibility of parole, ensuring he would never be released from prison. Significant questions remained about whether Kraft acted alone in committing these murders. Forensic evidence in 2 cases revealed additional fingerprints and DNA that did not match the California Strangler, suggesting possible accomplices or multiple perpetrators in some instances. The physical logistics of Kraft's crimes raised additional concerns. Moving bodies weighing up to 200 pounds and keeping them in his vehicle for extended periods without detection seemed impossible for one person to accomplish alone. Investigators also questioned how Kraft's photographs of murdered victims were developed over the years, without any photo laboratory reporting suspicious content to police. Kraft lacked both darkroom facilities and the necessary technical skills for film development. Suspicion fell on Jeff Graves, Kraft's former partner, but Graves died before police could question him about potential involvement. Bob Jackson later claimed to be Kraft's accomplice in murders in Wyoming and Colorado, asserting that Kraft's list only included memorable murders and the real victim count approached 100. Law enforcement ultimately rejected Jackson's claims. Randy Kraft remains imprisoned, his decade-long reign of terror serving as a chilling reminder of how a methodical killer can evade capture while leaving an indelible mark of horror across an entire region.